I'm very proud to introduce Daniel Donaghy, who's reading for us in the Poetry Center in Patterson, but we're reading remotely because of the pandemic. Dan is the author of 3 book-length collection of poems, and he's originally from Philadelphia. He's a professor of English at Eastern Connecticut State University, where he teaches courses in poetry and poetry writing, and edits a new poetry journal called Here, which is a wonderful journal. And he's received numerous awards from the university. He is currently the Poet Laureate of Windham County in Connecticut. And I think you're in for a real treat to hear Daniel's very layered and specific and beautiful poems. Let's welcome Daniel Donaghy.
Oh, thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this and for everything that you have done for poetry and your own wonderful work, which continues to inspire and teach me and so many of us. I'd like to start, here we are in summer. I'd like to start with a summer poem. This is called Nakamixon Lake, which is in Northeast Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is so big, you know, that from where my neighborhood to get up to the Northeast to go, if you couldn't get down the shore, this was like going to the country, getting out of the city to go to, you know, a big park. It's called Nakamixon Lake. Far from the city that closed on us like a fist all June and July, away for a few minutes from the family party and its cooler of iced Millers, I pencil dove into the lake, my body stiff as a nail as it cut through water that darkened as I sank, bubbles rushing up like smoke as I sliced down and down, pushing up with my palms, deeper into what I never felt in those row homes set along greasy avenues, not freedom exactly, but something like it, a bounce my lungs ached against, past mud-silted sunnies and bass, beneath the staccato of outboards and screaming children, my father's black lungs drifting away with my mother's black eyes and her cries in the hallway at night, the Sisters of St. Joseph vanishing when I closed my eyes to their Bible passages and the prayers we said by rote, sinking down past drowned logs until my foot wedged between rocks. On the bottom of that lake, I hung like a balloon fighting to free itself from a greedy boy's hand, flailing my arms in the cloud I made, squinting against the vise closing in on my temples, looking up to the sky's white rim along the surface where, like a bird, a beer can fell, the twig of a cigarette, and then my father, who couldn't swim, fell face first toward the last bubbles I could push from my nose and mouth. He held his arms straight out, as if across a canyon, roaring to me, touching first my hair, then my face, my eyes leading him to the foot he'd freed from the leather basketball sneaker he'd worked overtime to pay for. When he patted the back of my leg, I pushed off and burst toward the exhausted air above the lake, my arms churning like oars, thinking even then only of myself, not knowing until later how he'd known where to find me, how he'd calmed everyone before he dove, by swearing he would not come up alone. There's a twist there, right? So that's a poem about Philly. It's about the lake. It's about summer. And it's also, you know, about the complicated relationship I had with my dad, who loved me very much and showed it by doing, not by talking all the time. And that is for him. And earlier today, we had a lovely workshop, and thinking about the work that came out of that. There's my experience with water. We were talking about different writing prompts that could inspire a poem, and one of them is write about an experience near water. So this is a different kind of water, laundry water. This is called Laundry Night, 1983. The first one focused on my dad, and this one kind of focuses on my mom. Night, she'd throw their clothes into the car's trunk. Hair rollered tight, no note, Mother of two teenagers gone for hours, down Oakdale and Albert Streets. Frankie Avalon singing Venus, above the old Ramblers tapping valves as it machine gunned past Griffin's Deli and Garzon's funeral home, past Vegetation Church and School, her unringed fingers tapping the wheel, her breathing easier by the time she made the tricky right at Kip Street and swished into her usual spot outside Soapy Suds, almost forgetting her husband had left, she couldn't find a job, almost outrunning the family she broke from. When they said he was no good, a perfect love, and don't throw away all those teardrops coming back from the kitchen of their first apartment. And now it turned out her family was right. A scar on her cheek, the proof, and the stack of bills, the nightmares of police coming to take her children, her house, her dogs, leaving her nothing. And so the fears flowed while she sorted the brights and darks. Knowing there was no getting clean after months of crying herself to sleep, no point in scrubbing the stains ground into their lives, grass stains, blood stains, so much a part of her, they might as well have been skin. No way to make herself, her children, look presentable on what he sent every other week. Her own clothes stretched like her sagging arms and breasts, her shoes so holy they could be saints. A little joke she told the washer when she dropped in a load of whites, bobby socks to stockings coming back after 20 years, when she measured the powdered soap, the fabric softener, the bleach, always the bleach, which still stung her nose after the cycle was done, when she pulled out the clothes and held them overflowing in her arms. We're born into the life, we're born into our first family, and the lessons they give us, the stories they teach us, whether they know it or not. And for a long time we go along thinking, that's the only story there is, and then if we're lucky, other stories emerge which deepen and further and maybe lighten our experiences. And my second family, my wife and my daughter Abigail, my daughter Eliza, have been the missing words to a prayer that I didn't know I was looking to say. So this is a poem called Abigail Sandals, which is about my oldest daughter when she was very young, and sort of that transition from that early experience into the life I'm in now. Abigail Sandals. Our 2-year-old clumps and totters down the hall when I come home, calling my name, thudding twice before finally making it to the kitchen, where she stops across the room to show off her new sandals, twirling like her mom taught her, saying "ta-da," her latest word. Looking up in a moment she gives me as a gift, pointing down at her toes and the pink and purple flowers, smiling, one knee scratched, pulling me out of myself and that place I've been all day, pulling me by the hand back to her bright blue eyes and jellied sundress until we're sitting together in the doorway's stack of shoes, noses pressed together, her sticky hands patting my hair, hands each the size of my palm, smooth as the ears of the kitten I had in that other kitchen, which I held in my room when my parents yelled beneath the ceiling fan that wobbled and threatened to fly off. My father's hands tightening into fists to knock my mother down. My daughter bringing me back from all of that, jumping up, twirling and at her sandals into day after day, like this one. So that's a lot of weight to put on your kids, and I'm thinking of This Be the Verse, Philip Larkin's great poem, that your parents screw you up even if they don't mean to. I hope I'm not doing that when I acknowledge the great blessing that my children and my adult family have given me, and also of making me reconsider the challenges that my parents went through in that hard place all that time ago. School is coming up. We'll soon be opening schools here in Connecticut. And we do so quite uneasily. Families are going to make their own decisions about what to do. And in thinking about what to read today, and I thought I would read this poem. It's an experience that I don't know that people in our small little rural Connecticut town will have. Or it reminds me a lot of in my Philadelphia background, where you could just walk to your school. Our daughter's elementary school was close enough where you could just walk. So we literally walked her to her first day of school. And so I'd like to just share a poem recalling that time and looking forward to the time when we can get back to normal things like school and being with each other. This is a poem called Walking to First Grade. You asked over pancakes if we could walk to school instead of drive, so the trip that might have taken a minute takes 20. So we get to hold hands, the length of our gravel drive and all along our road. Your black shoes scratching stones, hair ponytailed, front tooth crooked and loose. Trucks arc around us past the Christmas tree farm and Protestant church. And for no one reason, I think again of my parents in their early graves. Hear them over me mornings like this, whispering. At the school's entrance, you pan the sea of strangers. We don't talk much. We wait by black-eyed Susans and coneflowers for the doors to open. When again, my mother's hand, tousle my hair, my father's kiss. But I don't tell you that. Kids scuffle past us on the sidewalk. Bus gears strain to a stop. As we walk the hall, I watch you move away, past the music room and library, past the cafeteria and its murals and folded tables, until at last we're outside room 3, name tags and pencil cases, friends and strangers, workstations, job charts. After a peck on the cheek, I'm alone in the brick hallway, where from a squat, I watch you shake hands with your teacher, turn in your lunch money, slide off toward your first desk without looking back. Different kind of interaction, awkward interaction. I'd like to flip, and this is a poem about my own experience and a grade school dance. I just heard that somehow they had the 8th grade dance for our town the other day. I don't know the circumstances of it, and I don't know. I'm nervous about all of this, as you can tell. But this is a grade school poem. You'll hear, I think it's 5th grade. Yeah, it's called The Kiss. 20 years later, I still see Katie Hickerson holding out her hand under our grammar school's dim basement lights the night of the spring dance. Bright red feathered hair, black sequin dress, green eyes staring up with what I now see as love. We were in 5th grade. By 6th, she'd be in Arkansas. Kids fled the dance floor when a slow song came on. So at first, it was just Katie and I for what was not so much a dance as a dizzy swing. Her hands around my neck, my fingertips brushing the warm small of her back the way I'd seen in movies. I don't know what we said or who danced around us, or if that song led into another, or how we slipped away from each other and back to our teasing friends. I know only that that dance went on for a long time, and that I wanted it to, that our heavy feet barely lifted off the floor, barely even moved. I know she had shiny braces with red rubber bands and big freckles on her cheek, and that in another time, I would have given her the kiss she was waiting for. Just shift gears here. I grew up in a working class area. My dad was an electrician. You know, we never had to, like, who's a good plumber, who's a good who could put in a sidewalk. Somebody on our block could do any job we needed. And I look back, Maria, we were talking earlier about, so if you grow up in a situation where you have less money, you can feel poor or be told by the world that you're poor. And it's not until later that you realize how rich you are in that situation. Lehigh Avenue in Philadelphia, where I grew up, had its problems, as neighborhoods can have its problems. And my house was full of the mysteries and troubles and joys of a house. But it was also, that block those were the most interesting people I've ever known in my life. And so much of how I get through the world is still navigated by those early discussions and hearing that the frustrations people can have as we come closer to election time of why people don't vote because people don't care about people like us. You know, those conversations were so instrumental in my life, and watching people go to work home, and you know, most dads I knew who were around and went to work had jobs where they would get their showers not before but after work. And this is in honor of that kind of hard work that is the backbone of the middle class of so many families, and certainly the background of everything that I come from. This is called What Cement is Made of. The cement plant, where all day wind spirals aggregate through scaffolds and storage bins tall as steeples, has only 3 walls, so it opens to Route 1 like a stage. 5 o'clock, dump trucks and conveyor belts stiffen like workers on washroom stools who stare into their brown or black hands, or who close their eyes, savoring already that first lager's cold burn against their throats. Inside locker doors, there were pictures of wives, kids, strippers, stenciled numbers, crusted cement on toilet tanks across the line of sinks. In shower stalls, concrete mix washes off like limestone, loosened by hard summer rain under a single shared fluorescent bulb. The young supervisor slips off waders and safety goggles and dreams of softballs arcing toward the rusted steel of the sun. Diesel and dust turn to soap and cologne, the day's heavy falling to rap music, phone calls, texts, doors opening and closing. Tomorrow's flatbeds glare from loading docks. Seagulls stalk the drum gray air overhead. Men ease their wasting bodies into jeans, t-shirts, ball caps. They wait for each other to pull on clean socks, lace their boots, then rise together, laughing toward their evenings. Like to share now, you know that certain phrases get stuck in your head and you hear them your whole life and they come back at random times and you know, you're not sure what you're going to do or if it's ever going to fit in anywhere. That's the case of this next thing I'd like to share. Just hang on just a second here while I call it up. This is a poem called The Station of the Stars. And I grew up hearing late at night in Philadelphia, WPEN, the Station of the Stars. You know, it was that Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, the crooner music, you know. And we lived in a 3-floor house, and we had the 2nd floor, and downstairs a couple lived, and upstairs was a man named Eddie Delaplane. And the story's about him, and it really ends up coming back to my mom as well, and some of the earlier things I mentioned, the struggles about my parents. This is called The Station of the Stars. Long after last call, muffled voices from the upstairs apartment drifted to where I lay in my fold-up cot at the foot of my parents' bed. Radio from the 1940s, WPEN, the station of the stars. Eddie Delaplane, home from the Memphis tap room, crooning with Bing and Rudy and Ukulele Ike, the songs that waited for him after the war, that waited again each night for him to weave his way down Albert and Jasper streets, to jam his key into the front door and piss on the floor and wall and radiator of our shared bathroom. It was the only music I remember a grown-up playing in our house, except for the day Elvis died, when my mother played all his records, all afternoon, on the turntable built into the console TV my cot pressed against. My father slept through the crooning, after 12-hour shifts, wiring boats, another 12 or 15 waiting when he woke before sunrise. If my mother heard, if she lay like me in the dark, listening to those voices longing for love or looking to make amends, if those men made her dream of how else her life might have been, she never let on. Some nights, our ceiling creaked when Eddie made love with Eleanor, or when he danced with her, or with Snowball, his black cat, crooning all the while, his heavy Oxford's clunking time as he led each partner through box step after box step, song after song, across the bare floor, directly above my head. I'd like to come back, I touched on that poem earlier, the Nakamixon Lake poem. And being a dad, I realize how hard it is to be a dad. And I think my father, his father died when he was 9, and mother when he was 14, and sister lied to help him get in the Marines. He was in the Marines and in the Korean War when he was 14 years old. Never really had a chance to be a kid, and never at that time, you know, you're supposed to, quote, just be a man. And I as much as I will not and cannot excuse a lot of his actions, I wish he would have had an outlet like poetry, or an environment in which he could have spoken the way I feel free to speak, the way language has made me feel free to speak about whatever it is that I want to speak about. It's a tremendous privilege. And he really he did not have access to language in a way that is necessary, I think, you know, to live a happy life. And that's something that I carry, and that made our relationship difficult, but certainly not loveless. And I'd like to share this poem called I Love the Day. I love the day you took me to the barber shop for the first haircut I remember, sitting on that board across Sal's chair before he pumped me up into the nicotine yellow world of men, taller at last than the jar of black combs and blue water, the shelf of scissors, clippers, tonics, creams, the ashtray his camel rested on, the straight razor he'd saved for you, the two of us out alone for a change. The same day we ate at that Woolworth luncheonette. All I've forgotten in my life, I still see my hot dog and fries and Coke, your cheeseburger and coffee, still feel the cold quarters I scooped up beside your plate thinking you'd drop them, handing them to you in the parking lot where you laughed. Was that the only time I heard you laugh? Then decided against going back to explain. The woman whose service we stiffed all those years ago is gone now as surely as you are into the cosmos's empty air. What a day we shared, free of your clenched fists, your silence, your Pall Mall smoke silhouette in the dark kitchen or by the front window. We walked side by side to your truck, the same one you'd load on another day, with trash bags of your clothes and take off. Here's to the rush a boy feels rising in a barbershop's throne. Here's to the smooth, cool neck he feels after clippers and baby powder. Here's to our spot at that lunch counter, our small talk, our knees almost touching. Here's to your hand on my shoulder while we walked out under what I recall as a boundless blue sky, to you calling me your pal, to one day you were my smiling father, and I was your happy, bouncing son. Very close, just three more poems I'd like to share. Our relationship between then and now, making sure we are living now and being fully present now, while also acknowledging the impact of our previous experiences. This is a poem right outside this window. In the world of Zoom, I could show you the hole a woodpecker has put in our house. And I should be angry. You grow up hearing a lot of different sounds, and if I could talk to the people I knew back home, and I would complain about a woodpecker. There's a lot of other worse sounds happening that happened where I grew up and that are happening even right now. This is a poem called "The Background Noise I've Heard All My Life." A woodpecker won't stop hammering my house. Tap, 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 tap. And just when I think he's done, he starts again. Tap, 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 tap. So all morning, I've been going outside to call like a crow, to wave my arms 30 feet below where he deepens and widens the hole he's made. Tap, 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 tap. And I start to dream of his demise as the noise I grew up around on that L-shadowed Philly Avenue comes back. Sirens, clacking trains, bass thump, shattered glass, cars idling and roaring past. Shouts from growing crowds where fights spilled out of Tinny's bar. While I lay in my bed inside movies and books, fearing what waited for me in a world I was not fit for. My father long gone, my mother and sister calling me at 12, the man of the house when all I wanted to be was anyone, anywhere else. I had no idea the who or where, since every man I'd known stayed put or got killed or sped off and never returned or went to jail and came back harder and more distant. The trips our people took, confined to bottles of Jack, cans of Bud and paint thinner, to sidewalk folding chairs on summer nights, maybe a cousin to visit in Jersey, maybe a weekend down the shore before another stretch of loading and welding and pouring and guarding, before coming home to blaring and screeching and yelling at all hours to the cacophony of background noises I heard my first 30 years, that I hear still. All those Philly childhood nights, screaming, smashing, clacking, crying up avenues and interstates, through toll booths, up train tracks and turnpikes, to swirl among the white birches behind my house. And in this silence, I never imagined myself within. Silence I breathe in every morning and hold. Silence this woodpecker, oblivious, starving, confused if he's looking for a mate so late in the year, can only for a moment disturb. So it's sort of a strange ode to a woodpecker, although I, is doing some damage. This poem's called Foreclosure, and this is about my neighbor right next to this house with the woodpecker. And this is, I wanted to read at least one poem today that confronts our current situation, and this is something that happened in March. Foreclosure for our neighbor. The bank said she could stay until spring if the pipes didn't freeze. It's March now. Daffodils breathe themselves open. A rope swing sways on a bare black bough. Next is a room she looked at yesterday, by the railroad maybe, or her sister's basement, just until summer. Then she doesn't know. She watched our youngest, brought her raspberries and coneflowers wrapped in foil. For not enough money, she drives people to doctors, asks questions for them, holds them up, holds their hands, helps them in the bathroom and in and out of chairs. Up onto and down tables that remind her, she says, when the light hits them, Dad's Dodge Dart bumper on those road trip Saturday drives. Hands gripping his headrest, while he blew from his mouth something like a whistle, the 2 lanes solid beneath them, some rock station on, or how soon she'd give in, and how soon she'd give in to that easy air, road rumble like a hand on her back, until she slept inside that wonderful nothing, she said, like it would always be there. Her parents up front, young, her dad tapping the wheel, sucking a smoke, blonde ponytail past his shoulders. The house they built waiting for them, with its hostas and purple salvias, its side porch facing the mountain. The house that's too much for her now, she says, with them and the equity gone. But it's all right. She won't miss the long driveway, the sinking basement. She won't miss windows so drafty she tacked blankets over them all winter, or the worrying that's come these past few years. To the house in which for so long they'd figured things out mostly. Won't miss walking quiet rooms so far past those afternoons of song and road and sky. And I'd like to end with an ode to Ocean City, New Jersey, which warts and all is my favorite place in the world, and is also the favorite place of my children. And this, I read poems earlier about my daughter Abigail. This is for my daughter Eliza. And thank you all for watching and listening. And this is a poem called My Daughter and the Waves of Ocean City, New Jersey. And I send this out with all of the hope as I'm playing it cautious and not dancing among the waves this summer, but I look forward to doing so very, very soon. My Daughter and the Waves of Ocean City, New Jersey. From my spot under our beach umbrella, I watch our younger daughter tire of shovels and sand shapers and shift toward the waves, safe between the lifeguards' green flags. Skipping and squealing in the water she's known for a week each summer of her life. And something in how she flings the sea's foam and shimmies under it takes me back to that fire plug on Lehigh Avenue in Philadelphia. Some older kids' cupped hands arcing the flow we danced under. Boys shirtless and cut off shorts. Girls nodding t-shirts soaked at their sides. Those shadeless 90-degree days when someone's radio blasted from a stoop and cars sloshed through a free wash until a cop's wrench stopped the good time we knew couldn't last. Just about every face I bring back from those days, gone from my life so long now, they could be next to me on this beach and I wouldn't recognize them. And wouldn't know what to say to them if I did, about that place of mill shadows and clacking L's, of all those days trying to look hard or crazy enough not to be messed with, all that shouting, all those fights coming back in odd moments like this to remind me they're still there. Somewhere in my head and chest I can't explain, and they're on my hands too, in scars and aching joints of broken knuckles and fingers, hands covered now by my daughter's, as she pulls me back into late June's easy breeze and summer promises, into her rush of fear and hope as she screams at the back-to-back waves headed in to throw her down, calling me to join her, wide-eyed, smiling, as she takes off into them. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining us for this Zoom poetry reading with Daniel Donaghy. It is part of the Poetry Center Distinguished Poets series, and it's made possible by funding from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and Passaic County Community College. So again, thank you for joining us. It was an amazing reading. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. That was so wonderful and so wonderful. I've heard some of the poems before, and they still make me cry. You really get to the gut of something and pull open a time in your life that makes us remember times in our own lives. It really is quite wonderful what you've done.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you, Susan.